What is up, everybody? It's Dr. Vibe here, host and producer of the award-winning Dr. Vibe Show, and two-time Canadian Ethnic Media Association award winner. Last Wednesday, I was blessed and highly favored to receive my second Canadian Ethnic Media Association award given in the internet news broadcast. So that goes along now with the one I received in 2018 for innovation. So I am very thankful for that. And I also once a month produce and host broadcasts for fathers and dads that are co-sponsored by Dad Central, Canada's national fatherhood organization, and Dove Men Care. You know what I say, you're blessed, highly favored, a magnet for miracles, and a solution for someone's problem. And it is the last Sunday of November. That means there's little bit over 1 month left till the end of 2020. Most people will say goodbye, 2020, had enough. But one of the best things that happened for me, and I'm sure many others, is end of the month, last Sunday of each month, we have 3 great individuals come on and give their takes from a Black Canadian lens about the stories that are going on nationally and internationally. So let's get them on. So first up, we've got Elle Jones. What is up, Elle?
I had to unmute. Congratulations. I didn't know about the award. Much deserved. Congratulations.
Oh, it's a success for all of us. You are definitely, all of you are part of it. So thank you so much. How have things been going with yourself?
Good. Tiring. You can probably see I'm tired. Trying to finish my dissertation, trying to, do things. I'm going to plug something really quickly.
Yes.
We do a Christmas toy drive every year for the families of incarcerated and criminalized people. Obviously, this year is a particularly hard year for people. We do accept toys, but if people aren't in Halifax, you can't really buy toys. But if you want to donate, I encourage you to donate at theblackpowerhour@gmail.com. That's theblackpowerhour, all one word, theblackpowerhour@gmail.com. Anything you can donate goes to toys for kids and then meals for the mothers, so that people can have a family Christmas. So if you feel so inclined, people can donate there. And that's my one plug I'll do on the show.
That's all right. Well, thank you so much, because our people are worthy of it. So thank you so much for that. Next up, we have Mr. Warren Clarke from Ottawa.
Dr. Vibe, congratulations on your recent success. That was all blessings, and humble to hear that you're able to, reap another award, or gain another award, sorry. So congratulations to you. All is well on my side. Happy to be here. Thanks a lot.
Excellent. And Cesar, where is Cesar? Cesar, how you doing, my man?
Hello, brother. How are you? Hello, Elle. Hello, Warren. Hi, BIA Media. I'm good. I mean, as we were talking about, I had a car collision 2 days ago, Friday. The beauty of Canada, I hit a wolf, the totemic animal, a totemic animal in white supremacy, we must say, but no just. However, I'm well. The car took a lot of damage, but I'm well. And honestly, I have a thought for the poor animal because, I'm not an environmentalist per se, but Pan-Africanism of the 21st century must address the environment. And as such, it is us humans who are on the territory of these animals. So to be quite honest, I'm happy to be alive, but I do have a thought for that poor animal. Who knows, maybe has cubs, babies. So I do have a thought for that poor animal indeed. But I'm glad to be here, and allow me to add my congratulations to you.
Thank you. I received that from each one of you. Thank you so much. Well, you are part of the success of the Dr. Vibe journey, and wait, let's just keep it going. Let's keep it going. And our first conversation topic tonight brought by Elle about something going on at the University of Windsor. So Elle, do tell us.
Yeah, so earlier this week, messages were exposed from a frat at the University of Windsor, Delta Chi, I think, which also has an American chapter. Like, they have chapters everywhere. And this chat was revealed to have all kinds of incredibly racist, anti-Black, homophobic, like you name it. This is something like a 4-year-old chat that's been going on between members of this fraternity. Some of those members are now in military, for example, because it also includes the alumni. So I think there's a number of military members who are posing with assault rifles, talking about like their Black hunting weapons. So we're talking about this kind of level of violence. Interestingly enough, the frat was posting publicly on Twitter about things like George Floyd, and then going in the chat and talking about like killing N-words, hunting N-words, like, of course, like you don't need me to describe what would be in those messages. So these messages were leaked to people on the campus and have been exposed. The frat, I think, has now been suspended, but the members, I understand, have not yet been suspended from school. So Black people and Indigenous people are having to go to school with these frat members that, like we're talking about hunting people to death. University of Windsor is, of course, I believe, the same place. Warren, you can back me up on this. This is where that white supremacist professor was, right? The one that did all the IQ studies on Black people. Is that University of Windsor as well? Or am I slandering them?
I think it was. I think you're right. So let's go with we think instead of anyone's quoting us.
Allegedly. But as I recall, through the 80s and 90s, there was a lot of Windsor had a dedicated white supremacist professor that had done a lecture about Black people having less intelligence, taught in the psychology department, and was very vigorously defended on the basis of academic freedom by the administration. Interestingly, was defended at the same time as women faculty who were doing reports on violence on campus to women were being the administration was saying they were doing bad research and they shouldn't be anonymous and all these things while defending a white supremacist. And that had recently come up again this summer because alumni who had to study under that were well, what has this school done about this? We've been living with this for years and we dropped out of school because of this person. So now you see in 2020 that you still see this frat, which of course many of the people aren't just in the university. I think one person was working for a kid's help phone, people working in the library, stuff like that. People who are working everywhere, but are going in private to express these kind of sentiments. So that has been the issue, and I guess that's my summary. I don't know if anybody else wants to jump in and add their thoughts on what that means or why this is happening. Oh, one last thing I'll say is this is very similar to what happened at Dalhousie a few years ago. People may remember the Dalhousie dentistry thing. This is where the dentists were found. This is in 2015. They were called the DDS Gentlemen's Club or something like that. And very similar, had a Facebook group. We're talking about raping their female classmates, chloroforming patients, knocking them out and raping them, hate effing their classmates, all kinds of that material as well. That was also exposed. And very famously, Dalhousie decided to use a restorative justice process only and has never used it again, only for these wealthy white dentists who mostly threatened to sue the university, right? So they were initially not removed at all. They were allowed to stay on in the clinic, doing teeth for low income people, because that's what the dental clinic is. So they were in contact with members of the community. Their names were never released. So to this day, you don't know if your dentist could be somebody that joked about raping you and knocking you out. It turned out that, of course, the bar that they drink at was called the Cavity at the school, and had they had a contest who could post offensive material on it, and there was swastikas, and that was really covered up. They never really talked about that piece. There was a huge racist piece along with it. They always ignored. And the university more or less tried to turn that into a diversity issue and made some diversity scholarships. But those men are now dentists. They never lost their access to being dentists, because of course there's so much money put into this. And so you see these things repeating, right? That over and over and over again, you see these secret spaces that only become revealed because somebody leaks it finally. Either they get they feel bad, or in the case of the dentistry, I think they talked about the girlfriend of somebody in the group or something like that, but they exist for years. And then when they're brought to light, so we can only imagine how many other of these spaces exist in places we've seen this exposed with cops, secret cop groups that talk about Indigenous people, and, secret prison guards groups that talk about killing Muslims. And, over and over again, we see these places where in these supposed secret discussions, these people express these things. So, yeah, I mean, that really shows you what's at the root of so many institutions in Canada. That's it from me now, for real.
I think I'll pick up from where you left off in terms of your question. Why do they keep happening? Well, it's embedded in our it's embedded in our Canadian social discourse. That's why it keeps happening, and it's going to continue to happen until we address it. And the one thing we don't do well as Canadians is we don't address these matters when they come up, and meaning not address them and just talking about them, address them and actually understand. What's at stake when we vote certain individuals in? What's at stake when we don't show up to have conversations? What's at stake when we don't have uncomfortable conversations to actually understand holistically of the concerns that we're going through? And when we continue to do so, by not showing up or not having these conversations, then we give the oppressor all right to think and feel that it's okay to be done again. And if we don't have these explicit conversations, then it continues to not only empower the oppressor, but it continues to oppress those who are marginalized or those who are the visible minorities in this country. We don't, looking at the article using a professor using the N-word at University of Ottawa, and this is in lieu of a professor using the N-word at University of Ottawa. It just goes to show, like, there's no regard of what this word means or what anti-Black racism means within a higher learning space. When we view the university, as a place where, well, again, using that term, higher learning. But that term of higher learning comes with white supremacy, and that white supremacy, it disregards racial Black bodies or Black people within the space, and we're continuing to see it. We're not having enough, people with power meaning in positions of power, I should say, to actually, show up to even programs like this to learn something. It's come to a point where it's like we know what we need to know about Black folk, and this is how we're going to respond. And even though when we say, in moments of and this was, I want to go somewhere else. Actually, now I'm thinking about it. In these situations, we're leaving it to students to deal with. That's another concern. We need to have a more unified front from all academics who are Black to stand up against this. We should not be leaving that labor power for students to only be speaking about their trauma. We have to share that trauma as educators with these students. So there's a lot of moving parts in terms of how we should look at this and how the conversations should surround these topics. But the most important thing is we have to realize that we're living in an anti-Black, racist, white settler colonial moment, and it's going to be that way until we try to shift our the social discourse to make it more inclusive. So that's where I'll end, and let Cesar please chime in.
What can I really say other than what Elle is saying is so truthful regarding the example of that university? But let's be careful. This is not just about University of Windsor. There's actually, I don't know if you're going to see it, but there's actually on the same day, so I believe it was on Thursday, November 26th, when the story broke out about the University of Windsor. Very interestingly, in Quebec, in Montreal, at McGill University. McGill University has a long history of racism from its founder, James McGill, a former slave owner, to so many instances where he got called out in terms of Canadian Ivy League universities. But Thursday as well, a story broke out about a white students' union group that basically claims to want to protect white civilization or white students for white civilization under claims of attacks towards white civilization, white culture, and calling out that all white people are racist, and there's a kind of a culture of guilt and shame. Beyond the simple area of academia, and I like to give the example, we need to address the very people that society, so on one side you have society liking to claim that, it's against racism. On the other side, it's not just that we have such groups, because, it's not a crime to want to create your own groups. But when we have the people like and I like to give that perfect example, and I know some people may take it offensively, but when we have intellectuals such as Canadian professor Jordan Peterson making some of these fragile white guys and white males, look at everything wrong in their life in terms of, it's because of Black people, the indigenous, how suddenly they start caring about the homeless when you say the refugees, etc., etc. This is where we have this type of situations. We had a conversation regarding the University of Ottawa and the N-word, but it's beyond that. We must understand the very society, and therefore its institutions, the culture in which we are living, and this is not just the Western world, but this is all over the world for Black people, is fundamentally racist. When I say fundamentally racist and keeping it in the context of academia and university, we must never forget that someone who is still taught in university, one of the brilliant minds, if you want to put it that way, of Western academia, Hegel, the German philosopher, if you read the nature of his comments toward Black people, especially Haitians, in the context of the Haitian Revolution of 1804, it's amazing to think that he had never set foot in Haiti. He didn't know a single Haitian person, and yet this person, despite such comments, just as Voltaire in France and in French schools, but even, if I give a very known example for our brothers and sisters who are Muslims and educated, Ibn Khaldun, in terms of the nature of the comments towards Black people, this is the same type of environment that we speak more of these topics, we bring them more to the forefront. Black people and indigenous people are saying more and more, we will not submit, we will not be taken advantage of, we will not be insulted without standing up. So you having these groups, as Elle was saying, creating themselves, having these conversations, and who did they turn out to be? Well, just like in the US, there was a time being part of the KKK was actually quite normal. It was something to be proud of. The former US president, I think it was Harry Truman, had clearly said, he was a member of the KKK in order to get elected. So this very same society, and if I can just add one little element, and Brother Warren said it so well, ultimately it's a matter of the politics. It's a matter of who we put in power. Let's not forget, it was just last year the scandal of Justin Trudeau and Blackface came out. For all that we can give him credit in terms of, at least calling out systemic racism in Canada, but it speaks to the volume of society when the elite, the most educated, the ones with the most opportunities to travel the world, the expression, travel shape the youth. If you can find Blackface in a Justin Trudeau, you cannot be surprised that the average cop, doctor, white person could buy into this type of narratives of racial superiority towards Blacks and Indigenous people. Très brièvement en français, les amis, les articles sont là. C'est par rapport au racisme dans les universités et notamment dans les fraternités, de voir le lien qui se fait entre des étudiants, pas juste des étudiants hommes blancs, mais également le lien avec les professionnels plus tard, mais aussi le lien par rapport aux politiciens et par rapport à la société. Et en ce sens, c'est vraiment un travail constant et pour nous de toujours se tenir debout par rapport à notre dignité.
I just want to jump in for a second and get your take, each one of your takes on this. Should groups, individuals like this be allowed to publish content like this on different digital platforms?
Sorry, can you say that question again? You were breaking up.
No, I'm just saying, should groups and or individuals like these be allowed to publish their thoughts on digital platforms? Like we just came from a US election where a lot of messages from a man who's going to be the former president were sort of highlighted saying, not verified, etc. Should digital platforms like a Facebook be more aggressive in blocking these sort of messages, or should they be allowed to have their free speech?
Well, someone unmuted me. Okay, thank you. When we live in a democratic society, the one we live in, it's very hard for us to say what is and what isn't acceptable. If we were living in a communist society like China, that answer had been easy. It'd have been like, no, right? But who am I to say what should and what shouldn't be allowed? Like I have seen over the years many things that have been published where I say to myself, like, why would this be published? Who would allow this, right? And then again, it goes to the publisher. You got to think about what are their ethics and what do they stand for. So us answering that question, then we also have to ask the question, who's in charge of publishing this work? Because how do we not know that these publishers don't line with the same views? It goes, just because Facebook is a well-known brand, how do we really know that Facebook doesn't side with some white supremacist views that we don't know what they side with, right? So it's a very hard question to answer, but ethically, in terms of what would drive equality and equity, and drive a understanding for these issues to be taken up as issues that we should address and solve, then the answer is no for me, right? They shouldn't be, because I heard Cesar bring up Hegel. When you talk about Hegel is a phenomenologist, and when you think about phenomenology, it's about lived experience and how do we know what we know through an epistemological lens. And when we do consider these ways of thinking, then we also have to understand how does the intersubjective impact our subjective understanding. So it could be through people directly, it could be through written information, and that's another form how people understand the social world. So if it was my way, then the answer would be no, but I'd like to hear other people chime in. Thanks.
Yeah, I think there's two kind of separate things here. So when it comes to social media, I think it's very worrisome to think that corporations control our access to information, right? So obviously, as somebody like a Black woman, I get harassed all the time. There's a reason I'm not on Twitter. At the same time, when we allow a private corporation, like a multi-billion-dollar corporation like Facebook or Twitter or whoever, to control what our public discourse is, then we also won't be surprised when mostly what gets targeted is the left, right? And we've seen that over and over, that post-Trump, there was like Elle Jones got banned, but what actually really happened is that Google was like delisting the results of like the World Socialist website and Black Agenda Report, and like there's like 100 like leftist sites that got basically removed from Google so that you couldn't search things. I experienced this with Black Agenda Report when I went to search an article on Kwanzaa that I knew they had written, and like I was like Black Agenda Report, Bruce Dixon, Kwanzaa, and it like would not show up on Google anymore, even though I knew that article was there. So that's actually what tech companies are doing under this guise of we're fighting white supremacy. They'll ban a couple of prominent sort of right winger or like white supremacists, white nationalists, but what's really happening underneath that is it's like discourse that challenges the state coming from the left that is actually being delisted. So as much as I think we're very uncomfortable with like a lot of what happens on that platform, I think it's very risky to suggest that corporations should be in charge of our flow of information, right? Like, there's huge numbers of people now that get their news from social media. And yeah, when they're saying this claim is disputed, sure, they're doing it for Trump going off on Twitter, but they're also doing it when people challenge their war narratives, right? So now when I assume the Biden administration wants to go to war with, I don't know, whatever country they're going to go to war with, then when you start criticizing their lies, they're going to be listing you as an unauthorized source and saying this source is disputed. This is not what we agree with, right? So I think we have to be very careful about that. So yeah, I think that letting corporations be in charge of our speech is like a really like rocky, like, I don't know, slippery slope, I guess is what I'm looking for there. In terms of access to like publishing, not everybody has a right or gets published. So that's the decision of publishing companies. So people, you don't have an absolute right to have your book published. Like, so there was that thing this week or last week or whatever with Penguin Random House with Jordan Peterson's book, and a lot of the staff were upset. And then people were like, oh, the woke staff wants to censor. Well, it's not censorship to not publish a book. Like, publishing companies turn down manuscripts all the time. So, you have no obligation to give somebody an advance or publish their book. So that's a bit of a different question. Like, publishing companies have always published what they want to publish, what they think will do well, what fits their brand, and they will continue to do so. I'm not being censored because I don't have a contract with Penguin Random House. They simply don't feel like publishing my work. They don't think it will sell or fit their mandate. That's not censorship. I mean, I might wish the publishing companies would publish Black women's work, but I don't think that that's like a personal act of censorship, So when it comes to that, I mean, those companies are always going to make choices, and people like then phrase those things as free speech, as though not teaching a book in the classroom or not publishing a book, like there's some inalienable right to that, and there's not. Like, we make those decisions all the time. And what does again happen with publishing companies is not white men that aren't getting published, it's Black women and like Indigenous people and Black people that aren't getting published. Like, our books are not out there like hitting, like it's only this summer where like they suddenly discovered, Black and Indigenous people existed, and suddenly the bestseller list, like 7 out of 10 was Indigenous and Black. But all these years they've been telling us our books don't sell and not publishing them. So I think that's a different question. But yeah, I don't know, Cesar can weigh in as well.
Thank you. And wow, Elle was very right in terms of who really gets published the most. I mean, systemic racism is everywhere. He's everywhere. And when you were talking about social media, I think everybody remembers a conversation that happened. It even went to in the even in terms of Mark Zuckerberg and others being challenged by senators in the U.S. in terms of to what extent those profits has to go in order to address human dignity. The problem, however, is that am I against the publishing of such hate-filled content? I may surprise some, but as much as I understand the cancel culture, I view an even bigger danger in terms of preventing for these groups to have a voice in the public sphere. And I'm going to explain myself. You see, the very nature of what we are doing in terms of our conversation here, but also in terms of activism, is to awaken the minds of our people, give them strength and resolve in order to stand up. And if we can do this with Black people, others are doing such with Indigenous, but also white allies, LGBTQ, etc., etc. If we don't have these hate-filled groups who are very much, to use a common term, full of white fragility here, one of the things that happen is that not only do they radicalize, but they even convince themselves further of being right. We must expose them in the public place and as such be able to have those conversations with them. This is basically addressing, some people will say, oh, but it's not the Nazi, it's not the KKK. This is the so-called alt-right, alternative right, which is just a more politicized and politically correct form of white supremacy. So we must have these conversations. We must have these challenges. Me personally, in the professional sphere, I've clearly said it. I'd love to debate Jordan Peterson. The question is, would Jordan Peterson want to debate me? Because it's easy for these people to seduce other whites who are ignorant and sensitive to these topics, but as well to seduce non-whites who may look at it from purely a rational angle without being able to see in between the lines and see the dangers they represent. Très brièvement, les amis, la conversation étant la question de Dr. Vibe, s'il faut permettre la continuation de ce genre de publication dans les livres comme dans les réseaux sociaux et au travers des différents points de vue. La question est évidemment complexe parce qu'on parle ici d'une question de censure, mais également de confronter de telles idées sur la place publique, notamment pour continuer l'éveil et l'activisme de tout un chacun.
Thank you, Cesar. I want to just follow up before we move on to another conversation piece. Warren, were you saying that there needs to be more Black academic support in regards to this? I just wanted to get some clarity on what you said in regards to Black academics.
No, thanks for the opportunity to explain that. And no, not by, there's no means it's saying that there's Black academics that are professors or doctors that are not leading this charge. There are. What I'm saying is that we shouldn't leave it up to the students to do this work. Okay, we have to think about the role of the students, particularly an undergrad student. Their graduates is to do one thing. There's to access the space of learning, which they many of them accomplished. 2, but be successful in that space of learning. Okay. 3, by no means we need to. And that goes for all of us in the academic space. We need to nurture these young Black students as best as we can, because one day they're going to be replacing us. And we need to ensure that when they're able to replace us, they're able to stand on their own 2 feet successfully. We need to ensure that when these moments come up where it's anti-Black racism, we all band together and not leaving up to students to go on CBC and these radio students alone by themselves to discuss about their experiences. We're all facing it as Black academics. And we need to, for those who are doing it, continue doing that job. And for those who have the opportunity, please see the opportunity for yourself. But most importantly, for these young Black students, because there's so many concerns within the university space that, if it's not in the news, we don't talk about it. Like the only time we speak about when these concerns come up more, vividly is like, oh, it dropped in CBC, so there's a conversation. No, like there's issues with in terms of Black students accessing graduate programs. There's issues with Black students in financial literacy. There's issues with Black students on writing and writing capabilities to ensure they're strengthening their work. Just this week, how many students have I spoken to purposely where I've said, hey, can I get 10 minutes to talk about the essay you've submitted? Because I want to help with your writing. And, and I'm not saying I deserve all this credit. I'm very humbled to be able to help these students. But the one common thing that I keep hearing is, no professor has taken the 5-10 minutes to show me how to write. Now, you would think, right? The next question is, well, wait a minute. We have writing services in the universities. But if the university is entrenched with white supremacy and some of these Black students don't feel that they can access these spaces, what's the sense? We're sending down to these opportunities that's supposed to help them, but they still come up feeling like, oh my gosh, I don't feel like I've been helped, or I don't feel like I've been supported. So we cannot allow Black students to just lead the charge on their own. We have to help them, or what's going to happen is they're going to be not only facing anti-Black racism as a mental health concern. I don't think people are really paying attention to when those are advocating for that. How many times I've been saying anti-Black racism is a mental health concern. You cannot be successful in the academic space if you're dealing with anti-Black racism on a day-to-day or week-to-week, which many of us are anyways. But realistically, the potential of that person goes down. We need to be focusing on, okay, we need to give these students a space so they can learn, develop like any other student that goes to university. And if we're not giving them that space to learn and develop, then what's going to happen? We run the risk of students leaving the university, not being able to publish, not being able to stand up and go into graduate programs successfully. And it just recreates the will. So I'll stop there. I hope I answered your question.
You did. Anyone else want to add to that? Oh, go ahead, Cesar.
I can add very quickly. When Brother Warren is speaking on mental health, basically anti-Black racism and the link to mental health, is absolutely right. When we look at the fact of how anti-Black racism breaks people, we just saw a perfect example in this hysterical and historical year of 2020 with what happened regarding George Floyd. It was beyond George Floyd. And when saying Black Lives Matter, it's about all Black people in all aspects, because the psycho-emotional trauma that Black people go through is not just in terms of the next Black person, man or woman or child killed by a white police officer, but it's also that constant trauma in terms of trying to rent or own a house, in trying to go into an interview or trying to get a job, or even just going to school, whether it's in elementary or graduate/postgraduate. All of these aspects, we basically live in a world in which, as one of the topics of intersectionality, where the dominant groups, and when you speak of race in the Western world, whites, can afford not to think in terms of race, but us who are Black, as young as 3 or 4 years old, become conscious of our skin color and what comes with it. Even for those Blacks coming from the Caribbean or from Africa, even if they come as refugees, they become conscientized to the fact that this very skin color in this society, even as Canada loves to play the hypocritical game of always pointing south to the US or pointing to England and Europe. No, even here, right in the cities that we live in. So yes, indeed, anti-Black racism and mental health are very strongly linked, and it kills opportunities and potential of Black people.
Okay, excellent. Elle, you want to join in, or you're good so far?
I'm just going to say hi to Sylvia Paris and congratulations on the RBC Entrepreneur. Is it Woman Entrepreneur?
Yes, I believe so.
Yes, so hi, Sylvia, and congratulations.
Thank you, Sylvia, for everything you do. You are a consistent champion for all of us, and we appreciate it and don't take it for granted. We got limited amount of time left, so what I'm going to do is I'm going to have Cesar come on, talk about a story of an unfortunate happening in Brazil. So go ahead, Cesar, please.
Dr. Vibe, thank you so much. Thank you so much for allowing me to address this story. And Luke, please feel free to share the article. I'd just like for all of us, Black people, but also allies, no matter what background or identity we share, I want to pay tribute to the memory of our brother, Joao Alberto Silveira Freitas. I want to, give my sympathy, my Black solidarity to his family and friends, and also mention my support to all those protesting in Porto Alegre. Our brother was killed last week. The crazy thing about him being killed, and for me, it really saddens me, and I take it personally. I'm going to explain to you why. The way white supremacy portrays to us Brazil is that postcard of a racial democracy. It's that postcard of soccer, samba, and sex. It's that tropical paradise where there's no racism, everybody's mixed. Last week was also Black Consciousness Day. That's when he got killed. Last week, not only that day, but pretty much the month of November in Brazil is the month of Zumbi, Zumbi dos Palmares, the hero of Afro-Brazilian resistance to slavery. And he got killed. He got killed, murdered in a very similar way that will remind people of a certain Abdirahman Abdi in Ottawa being punched to the face and to the head by one white security guard and former military. Meanwhile, another one was holding him down, and there was a third one who was recording it all. The inhumanity that's being given to Black lives not only makes us say Black Lives Matter, but allow me to add this other angle. This is the Brazil where our president, Lula Ignacio da Silva, got falsely put in jail, and Dilma Rousseff of the Workers' Party, PT, got pushed away from power for a Jair Bolsonaro, a supporter of dictatorship, to come in power and denies that racism exists. And I have to say, he does have that Black friend. He does have that Black friend who, of course, gives him that caution that he's not racist. But this is also in Porto Alegre, a city in the south of Brazil, where is held the World Social Forum, basically a gathering of alternative thinkers and leaders to try to create a world without racism. This has been going on for years, and for those of you who notably are in social work, as I teach every week, you think of the work of Paulo Freire and the pedagogy of the oppressed. And yet, this is where our brother Joao got murdered. I should say assassinated, because no one will make me believe that the fact that he was Black was not a strong factor, just as Abdirahman Abdi, just as Breonna Taylor, Sandra Bland, George Floyd, Adama Traore, Solomon Teka in Israel, etc., etc. So many names, so many names, so many names. So I want to make sure that our brothers and sisters, but also anyone non-Black, or even if you don't define yourself as a Pan-Africanist, or you don't go to Carlton, or you don't know Elle, or it's your first time following the Dr. Vibe, that you understand how the topics that we're talking about, everything is linked. Everything is linked. Any of us walking in England, in Brazil, in China will be seen and treated first and foremost as Black people. Before I let my brother and sister speak, I just want people to remember this quote from our Pan-Africanist hero, Bantu Biko. The most potent weapon of the oppressor is the mind of the oppressed. Ultimately, it is not up to the politician. You know my views on religion. It is not about some Jesus to come back, or some Allah, or prayers, or all of that. Not at all. It is up to us to stand up in the dignity of our heroes and to be in solidarity to one another, because we cannot let this type of things go on. It's terrible. It breaks the souls of our people, just as it kills the bodies. Thank you so much for bringing forth this topic. That means a lot to me. Activists in Brazil need our help, just as you remember Marielle Franco. Activists in Brazil, they need our help. The people, Afro-Brazilian, need our help. Too often when racism is being brought up as a topic, it's too US focused, and it must be so because it's the empire. But we must never forget Brazil is the country that counts the most Black people outside of Africa. Brazil is the country of the Americas that last ended slavery in 1888. It seems like yesterday, it seems like today in the history book. Thank you.
No problem. Anyone want to add on to what Cesar has shared with us?
Cesar, thanks for being vulnerable. I appreciate you. And, I trust I can add value to this conversation as I can feel and sense, I sense your energy all the time, but I'm sensing it more when you speak on this topic. So I appreciate you. My adding value is again, looking at this colonial moment. I think this is another understand how Black masculinity, I'm going to trouble gender here, people, is degraded, it's villainized, it's demonized continuously. It's not only taken from what Cesar just mentioned. It's not only happening into North America, it's happening around the world. The Black male body is been shown over and over again. Just by being male and Black, you're a threat. Just by being male and Black in the public sphere, you're a threat. This is an example. I'm only knowing of this story today, to be very honest with you, so I'm not going to go too deep on the context of the story. But just by looking at it, here's another example of we're seeing a George Floyd, but not in North America. We just dealt with something very similar to this, situation as Cesar just mentioned with Abdi Rahman Abdi. This is another example again and again, and it continues happening, that Black male bodies are disposable and should be disposable. From an intellectual to a physical, and with this young Black male, the questions will arise, which is, what did he do? What did they do to deserve this? And there's never the questions as to why does this keep happening, and what can we do to stop this from happening? My research particularly looks, intimately about, the social development of Black young men in Canada, particularly Ontario and Quebec. And, I'm writing the final piece of this dissertation now. And the common theme is that, regardless if you're in education, regardless if you're in formal education or informal education, regardless if you're in the public sphere, regardless of where you are, marginalized, you're still portrayed as the villain in comparison to the white male body. You're compared to in these demonized and stereotypical terms all the time, which in many cases, and unfortunate cases, the next step is the killing of Black men, right? And the one thing that we have to consider, especially in our Black communities, we have to understand how gender really functions within our Black community. And this is no way, no how am I saying that Black men have it worse than Black women. We equally go through our own social oppressions, that impact us differently. The result for Black men is death, more times. Not forgetting Breonna Taylor, not forgetting the many Black women who's died by the hands of the state. But when it comes to Black men bodies, this is the common theme, and it continues to happen. And sometimes it's in the news, sometimes it's not. But the more just to end things, we have to take a critical approach in terms of what the Black male body really represents, and our vulnerabilities is not something that we're allowed to share and show. We are again using that word disposable. So that's where I'm going to start and stop, just to add value to what Cesar had mentioned. But Cesar, I appreciate you. Thank you.
Elle.
Well, I was going to pick up on that in terms of a conversation Warren had floated having when we were kind of picking the topics, which is around, I suppose, like loving but principled disagreement in the Black community, including, for example, how do we address issues of gender in the Black community without dogging each other out, right? So we know that patriarchy does exist in the Black community because it exists in every community, right? Everything that exists in the Black community exists as a reflection that we are part of dominant society. And we're often blamed for creating it. Like, we're the most homophobic community. I'm like, we didn't create homophobia. Like, homophobia is in the dominant culture, and therefore people in the Black community reproduce it. We didn't create patriarchy. It's in the dominant culture, and we reproduce it, right? So we understand that white supremacy has also brought us all these other things. But we also do need to address male community. But how do we do that without, then we're like, well, Black men ain't shit, Like, how do we manage to have a conversation about, for example, gender relations in the Black community and accurately address, how power works without then turning to myths about Black men as, Black men don't take care of their kids, which is a lie. Black men are actually more active in their children's lives than men of other races, right? Just because we have non-traditional family structures and we may not necessarily all be married doesn't mean that Black men don't take care of their kids, right? Black men don't do XYZ, right? And like a lot of that stuff gets picked up and circulated in the Black community, even in terms of like this argument that was used, well, Black people supported the crime bill. I'm like, I don't doubt it, because Black people support a lot of destructive stuff that's based on internal racism against ourselves, right? Where we come to believe that we can only be disciplined or contained or imprisoned, that we're these bad people. Like, we have picked that up. We believe in myths of Black on Black crime. We believe that, we're the only people that can't unify. We're the only dysfunctional people. We're the only people that do this. Those are narratives that are fed to us, and we repeat without understanding that they're based in deep anti-Blackness. So, we can both say that obviously, there are gender relations in our community, as in every community, that we need to address. But also, we understand as a community that, that really sort of idea like, well, Black men just are this or Black men just are that, like, isn't helping us. Like, liberation is going to need to be based in our unity, which also includes overcoming those. So it's like a complex question for Black people. I'm a Black woman, so I like frequently have frustration, say, in organizing spaces where I feel like, men, sometimes you feel like a Black man just has to breathe and get like, designated a leader, and like Black women are out here, like killing ourselves and not getting resources. Like, I feel that. But then I also, like strongly work with Black men in prison that, I see their brilliance and what they're doing and how much they've been discarded by the system that just wants to lock them away, and like what work they could be doing if they were given freedom, right? So, we can both have those discussions, which like I have, like the dudes in prison are always like calling you up and talking about like, but I saw this thing on the news, and like we'll end up in these discussions about feminism and do they believe in feminism, and like, like we can have those discussions as a community in respectful ways. But I think it's a sort of ongoing issue, right? Like how, this goes back to like the Moynihan report, right? Where Nixon was creating this like trying to use like patriarchy and sexism to split the Black community. So saying like Black women are illegitimately too powerful in the Black community, and we need to elevate the Black man in these like really patriarchal ways that the Black community again like bought into, because of course people can see that Black men are not having the success that they should have in a racist society, but then blaming it on Black women. And that was something that Moynihan did deliberately to take the strength of the Black community, to split our families, to try and degrade Black women, and then like create this whole white structure to our communities that wasn't part of our communities, right? And a lot of that is coming out of white supremacy that then we like adopt as our own. So I don't know if Warren and Cesar want to jump in on this, but I think, yeah, like what Warren was saying in terms of like, we have to uphold our brothers, right? And then we can also address within our communities the problems that come in any kind of power. Like we have so many power, like education, class, shade, like all those things are things that affect and divide us as Black people that we can have a discussion about in respectful ways. I'm a lighter skinned Black woman. Like when darker skinned Black people like you are privileged, that is true. It is true. There's nothing to argue there. There's nothing to get defensive about. They're not attacking me. Like that is a reality. And I'm not offended by that discussion. I, as a lighter skinned person, have to take that on and understand how being closer to whiteness has benefited me in the eyes of white people. And like white people might be more comfortable with me than with a darker skinned Black woman. We can't be afraid of those complicated discussions in our community is what I'm saying, right? That we have all of these different relationships caused by white supremacy, and we take them out on each other instead of identifying where they come from, walking them back and talking with each other about them. So I'll stop talking. That ended up really long. I didn't mean it to be long.
I appreciate you. Thank you for saying that. I'll say this, backstage I made my comment, right? And my comment wasn't to make people feel I'm calling them out. It was a comment to exactly what you just said. And I appreciate you saying that, because we do not address these issues. We do not get into these uncomfortable conversations to say, hold up, wait a minute. We're actually causing hurt when we allow these things to happen, or we allow certain conversations to happen. We let them go, and then we use those moments to fuel us to either gain success or to bring down our fellow Black folk. We need to stop that. We need to look, and when they arise, we need to have conversations. Say, hey, well, hold up, this is not the space for that. You know what I mean? We are not doing that. We need to be more vocal about when these situations come up and understand that, hey, if we're going to actually heal our communities and heal the trauma that we're going through, we need to address it and make sure that it's addressed where it's everybody is liberated and everybody can move forward. And it's not about making sure one person feels better than the other, but it's about having that conversation that says, you know what? Yeah, we're going to get in some deep topics, but at the same time, we don't have these conversations where it's going to rip somebody apart. That's not going to happen. You know, we don't understand what, as you mentioned, Elle, what white supremacy is doing to us. White supremacy comes in different forms. It's like, it's like this, invisible fog that's all around us, and we don't even realize that it impacts the way we think. If we look at the work of Frantz Fanon, he's been talking about colonization and the white settler ideology from 1952. You know what I mean? And how it impacts the black man and the black woman's psychology, mental state in terms of thinking that themselves are white. So we need to understand what whiteness is doing to us and how it is destroying our communities, and is how as we're getting to confusion where we can't see how we can solve and heal. So I definitely agree with you, Anil. Thank you for bringing that up.
Go ahead, Cesar. You're on mute. Oh, there you are. You're good now.
Yes, I totally agree with my brother and my sister. And you see, I don't like to talk too much in terms of myself, but I got family all over the world. So Brazil, I didn't talk much about it. Actually, I only talk about it with one friend, but I have family in Brazil as well. But when we have this conversation, Elle is absolutely right. The way white supremacy, Arabic supremacy, to name only those two in terms of Christianity and Islam, have so divided us in terms of religion, in terms of skin color. I mean, you look at from racism, colorism, you look at examples of countries so divided, such as, for example, Haiti, many division within. You look at Black America, Black Canada, you look at how we look at immigration. Elle is absolutely right. Homophobia, one of the things I sometimes tell people is that Black people are not really homophobic. Black people have been brainwashed into leucodermic, so lighter skinned people, whites, Arabs, views of gender, which has produced homophobia by religion. It's not our essence. I always remind people, when you see the movie Black Panther, and I know it's fiction, but we can learn a lot from it. It's a fiction that speaks to the essence of our Blackness, where truthfully, we must become Pan-Africanists. We must value the Blackness within us, on our skin, but especially within our soul, as each and every one of us, to be quite honest, in terms of our ancestors before these historical catastrophes, we are far less Black, if I can put it that way, because we have been so corrupted by the ideals, the practices, and ways of our oppressors. And when I say oppressors, let's be careful here. I'm not saying each and every white person is a Christopher Columbus or head of Hitler. But we live in a world in which that white person is not there thinking that the skin color might be a factor when the police pulls them over. And yet us, because we're Black, from dark skin to light skin, and everything in between with green eyes or blonde hair, we can be victimized. When we look at basically what happens worldwide in terms of notably Black bodies being victimized, allow me to go back to 1992. You may see me coming. Rodney King, the LA riots. But how many of our brothers and sisters, and especially young people, have heard of Latasha Harlins? How many people have heard of this young teenage Black girl who was shot by Korean merchants and was an inspiration to Tupac Shakur writing the song Keep Your Head Up as an ode to Black women? But at the same time, and I don't know, Luke, if maybe you can play the video, when we talk about also outside of just North America and the Western world, when we look at what happened notably in Brazil, and I really think, my brothers and sisters, you have to understand, it's not a matter of special love to Brazil, but It is the country that has the most Black people outside of Africa. In 2014, there was a case. 2014, while they had, if I'm correct, the football, yes, the World Cup of football, there was a case of a Black Brazilian woman, Claudia Ferreira da Silva, who was killed by police through an exchange with gangs, and her body was dragged outside of a truck. It's absolutely incredible to think of the reality of Blackness. And let's be careful. I don't do into victimization or hyper-victimization, as I put it, just as I don't do into white shaming or white guilt. But in addressing the topics as they are, we must recognize, the United Nations recognize it, there's a special identity to being Black, because on the four corners of this world, we carry the stigma, we carry the scars, we carry the wounds. Everything has been made to divide, to conquer us. We have Black people worldwide who do not know not only the history, the culture, but don't know how much we have contributed to the greatness of this world. When I go there to high schools, I see young Black students, 12 to 18 years old, 19 years old, shedding tears because, and they say it, Mr. Cesar, we've never seen or heard someone like you. It's not about me. It's about the fact that they're asking for Warren, they're asking for Elle, they're asking for Dr. Vibe to enlighten them, to bring to them that Wakanda fiction into reality of the potential where we see we are kings and queens. It's not a joke. It's not a game. It's really a question in terms of our soul.
Anyone want to add? I think that's a good way to end off. Anyone want to add to that? Warren, Elle, anything else you want to add?
I think, Cesar, you said it, like you want to have that, people have this ideology that they want that Wakanda feeling, but, not everybody wants that in our community. I'm going to just, and you were alluding to that as well, how do we get there? That's the question. How do we get to this unity? I don't know. I don't have the answer for that, and I'm sorry to leave my final thoughts on it. I don't know, but it's a work in practice that has been practiced for so many years, and we're still repeating our mistakes. You brought up Hegel, and I'm actually really excited to actually have a side conversation with you, Cesar. When you brought up Hegel, because that's phenomenology. These people didn't come up with these theories. If we know anything about phenomenology, it was definitely rooted in the Nazi way of discourse. And that was their theorists understanding how to control people, understanding what the subjective is, understanding what historical narratives means in terms of impacting the person's subjective understanding. So, it's a mind game we're playing, and we are not understanding how this game really works. And a lot of us, have the opportunity to access information through, going through formal education, or taking a book and reading in their privacy, or seeking knowledge the way they do. But not all of us are doing that, and because we're caught up with what white supremacy is telling us what to do. And that's where I'll end. So I don't want to dominate. But thank you.
Elle, anything else?
I was trying to find a link to put in the chat really quickly. For people who are interested in this conversation about Hegel, and obviously if you didn't study philosophy, you might feel like, what? I was trying to open it without it making noise. It's Mboiseni Nklozi, Ndlozi, lecturing at University of Cape Town in South Africa. And he does a really amazing lecture laying out the roots of Western thought through Hegel, and then the challenges to it through people like Fanon and Mbembe and like African philosophers. And I really recommend it, because this idea can seem really difficult. And then you're like, what? Like, why are these academics like talking about like these words, and it's actually stuff that you understand, you just don't know that you understand it. And I think Nklozi does a really, really good job of laying it out, and why it's so important for us as Black people to understand this. So his name is Ndlozi. Mboseni Nkosi, one of Africa's brightest minds, like the continent. I'm not saying Africa is a country. I mean, like across the continent, one of the brightest young minds. He's a member of the South African Parliament as well. A doctor, like, you know, just like a really bright young man. And this lecture, I think, is really great for introducing you to a lot of these ideas. So Nkosi at UCT, University of Cape Town, look up that lecture. There's some singing at the beginning too of freedom songs, you know. He writes a lot of the songs for the EFF as well. So, you know, just a multi-talented person. But that's my rec for understanding these ideas. It's a great lecture.
Excellent. Well, we have closed off another thing. Cesar, did you want to add something before we leave this episode? Go ahead, Cesar.
Yes, thank you so much. Very quickly, I want to bring my support to my Black brothers and sisters, but also Indigenous allies, as last week they were protesting in Ottawa downtown at the corner of Nicholas Street and Elgin. Laurier, if I'm correct. Yes, Laurier and Nicholas Street. I want to bring them support. They were arrested by police. I believe it was by 2:30 or 3 in the morning. But later on in the debate about the police budget, an increase of 13 million, they had a lot of support, speaking of defunding the police and investing more in the Black community and Indigenous communities. At the same time, as Luc is showing with this article, I also want to bring my support to Black music producer Michel Zecler, a Black man in Paris. This week, he was beat savagely by 3, if I'm correct, it's 3 or 2 police officers. Yes, white police officers in France. These police officers are so often talking of fearing for their life, feeling in danger. They did not know they were being recorded. There was a camera recording them, and it leaked to the media, and even politicians had to speak and address in terms of the outrage. This is France, the nation of human rights, of les droits de l'homme, that tends to, as in Quebec, deny systemic racism. And yet, time and again, not just Adama Traoré, but time and again, systemic racism at the forefront of French society. So thank you so much to everyone. Thank you for this very strong conversation. And it was important to kind of briefly answer Warren. The fight, the struggle never ends, but we must stand up and keep walking, keep acting each and every day. And if even an hour of Dr. Vibe or just a simple hi brother, hi sister, how are you? A smile from Elle, a shared intellectualism from Warren, and a reminder of a sister who won an award. We need all of that to strengthen our soul. Let us never forget Brother Chadwick Boseman, what he left to us in the psyche, our imaginary for our Black children. Yes, you can. Forget Obama. Yes, you can, because you're Black.
Right. Well, enough on that. I'd like to thank each one of our panelists for another epic conversation. I'll just say the best. Elle, what is the best way to get a hold of you?
Email probably el.jones@msvu Mount St. Vincent University.ca. My Facebook is always full, although some people must have blocked me lately or left Facebook because there seems to be some slots open, but it's hard to make it onto my Facebook.
All right, great. Warren?
You can always reach out to me at if you visit my website, or there's my email address there as well, warrenclarke@cmail.carleton.ca. My website, warrenclarke.ca. I'd be available. Can't guarantee if I'm going to respond right away because it's busy season for me, but I'll do my best. Thank you very much.
Great. Cesar?
Best way to reach me, info@rootsandculturecanada.com, and to also follow the great work of our CEO, Ketia Peters. And for those of you who follow me on Facebook, always more intense content coming for the cause. Always for the cause.
Thank you. Best way to get a hold of me is at my website, vibeshow.com. I'd like to thank again the panelists for taking the time. The next time you see them, we are hoping to do an end of year wrap up. 2020 was quite a year for Black Canadians and Blacks around the world. So you know they're going to be coming straight and hard and with full fire before the end of the year. Just like to say thank you also to BIA Media for a great production. Also, everyone who watched live on the replay or listened on the replay to this epic conversation. As always, I end off, live your life as a dream if you can dream it. Sometimes you have to get small to get stronger. Block assumptions and aim bigger and better, aim higher, aim wider, and remember to give yourself grace. God bless. Peace to all. Keep the faith and walk good.